Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Raising the New Earth. Hi, Noah.
Hi, Brooke.
Hello. All right. Well, so today our episode is on mental health. Um, really kind of we want to break down what that means, like to be mentally healthy, and then all the different contribute contributing factors to being well mentally, and just some of our different experiences. Noah is doing a lot right now, particularly in that realm, with people that she's seeing in a clinic that she's at. So we're just excited to talk a little bit deeper on this subject and explore it from a perspective that you don't necessarily see talked about in kind of a mainstream way. So, with that, I guess I will start in saying that I think that a lot of the ways that we look at mental health is through kind of a lens of disease, really, rather than dis-ease. So, you have depression or anxiety, or you're bipolar, or, there's a label that is associated with whatever mental health disorder or disease that someone may have. But I think that there's opportunity to kind of change the paradigm from it being a disease to really just a dis-ease, meaning that it really is a symptom to a broader perspective of what's going on with the person. So, there can be, of course, many different causes in these symptoms, but what I like to think of, and what I think that we learned through Journey of Intrinsic Health, is really the value of connection. So, at the very essence, at the very core, I think in many ways, mental health can be looked at as the lack of connection. So, whether that is the connection to yourself, connection to community, connection to source energy, wherever you get kind of that spiritual understanding. So, and really even boiling that down further, you can look at it as a way to, it's a symptom of the belief that you are separate and that you are not a part of um of the whole. That so I don't know, that I think that there's so much there that we can explore, but no, what are your thoughts in kind of looking at it through that lens?
Yeah, so I work as a nutritionist and dietitian at a mental health facility in Southern California. And first thing, what I love about working there is the multidisciplinary platform. I think this is really important to acknowledge and to shine a light on mental health being more than mental. Right? There's a lot of things that go into someone feeling depressed or anxious to a point where they have to admit themselves, or their parents admit themselves, because the ages there are 12 to 30 in different houses, 9 different houses. So there is what you said about, I don't know if you touched about the idea of community is so important, because when they get the tools that they may not have been able to get somewhere else, definitely not with, um, if they have peers that their influence on their behavior is for the negative, they're not going to get the tools that can help them heal from within. But the therapists where I work offer great assistance. They have psychiatric team, they have psychologists, they have me for their nutritionist. They mainly do CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which I personally love. And you see case to case that, most of them have already come with some kind of an addiction. So there's an underlying addiction there, whether it's vaporizing or addiction to pain medication, um, drugs of some sort more than pain medication. But you see that is kind of like the underlying cause that got out of control. And so they had to admit themselves, or they had to be admitted by their family members to that facility. And as I work client on client, one-on-one, and in groups, I realize that there's so many different facets that need to be peeled, rather than put the label of you're mentally ill, here's your medication, good luck to you. Because that's just not going to cut it. That's not cutting it. They're already on
Right.
so many pain medications. They're already on so many psychiatric drugs, from, Adderall to lithium. So that didn't help them. So what are we trying to do now, right? How do we change the mood? How do we change the behavior? How do we reinforce the fact that they can heal?
Yeah.
Right.
I think like the part about the addiction too, that like in all these cases that you're seeing, there's an underlying addiction. I think that when you look at addiction at its root as well, it's like looking to find fulfillment in something
Right.
where you're not getting it somewhere. It's filling a void. So I think that and you're completely correct that just handing out medications and like thinking that that's going to cut it. I mean, because there's so much just there. I mean, one is like just to come from it from the pharmaceutical perspective of just handing them a medication, you're kind of going with the belief that it's just like some biochemical thing is all that's going on, and it just needs to be adjusted. So I think that is one kind of like misunderstanding or right there, but also knowing that when you are giving these pharmaceuticals, they come with their own side effects. And so, and everybody has their own bio of individuality. So it's going to affect people very different. And I've heard a lot of stories of people who have gotten on things for their depression or their anxiety, and in many times it made it worse.
Right.
So I think
Right.
that's it's like, to me, like looking at it through a holistic lens is the only way you're really going to be able to move forward in
Absolutely.
being able to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when we look at those treatment options, we need to look at the whole individual with their unique capacities, to make sure that our treatments don't just stuff their natural capacities, their natural abilities, right? Instead of numbing what they're not, we need to start encouraging what they are. And for example, stimulants that are used in ADHD may abate symptoms short term, but long term, they actually downregulate the body's natural ability to produce those neurotransmitters that are responsible for motivation and ability to think outside the box, which I want, for example, my kids to think outside the box and overall creative expression. So it downregulates that. And similar neural images have been found in cocaine and methamphetamine use, prescription drugs, with decreased gray matter in the brain, which contains the neurons and the communication networks for the brain, and certain parts of the brain that are responsible for creative expression. So you don't necessarily want to do that, right? So the real crisis is the crisis of faith and the crisis of wisdom, and that seek for perfection of ourselves and the universe. And using the Western ways to assess and label the child or adult is really reductionistic in nature, and doesn't take into consideration the gifts that our kids come to the world with, the gift that we come to the world with, and the resources of the already healed parts within us that need to be shined through us if only allowed to be seen. So those prescribed drugs that are meant to downregulate the very pathway that would lead to the discovery of the miracle that we have within, like for example, with opiates, we downregulate every opiate receptor in every single cell of the body as soon as you give them a dose of morphine or whatnot. These pharmaceutical drugs shut down the entire network of pain control, such that the pain becomes so inevitable result of being on these medications. Like I said, 99 of those clients that I see that are admitted for depression and anxiety were already on Adderall or lithium or whatnot before being in this facility, right? Or if we look at ADHD medications, they're based on stimulants and can be very, very addictive, and they create a cycle of sleep insomnia, for example, or many of them, because they act like stimulants, methamphetamines, they inevitably destroy the cellular connection in our bodies and affect the brain functioning. And in the long run, may make the ADHD symptoms worse. So this is an unfortunate substance use, and that gives rise to substance use disorder epidemic that we see now in children and adults, especially with stimulants such as methamphetamines and Adderall prescription drugs. I personally have not come across so many kids and young adults with such issues. So there's a question to be asked: are we over prescribing that to everyone we diagnose with depression or anxiety? Or are we giving the families the tool to handle and deal and shine a light on the gifts that the kids have? Are we trying to make them sit down in a classroom that needs to be looked at as well? Do you really want your child to be sitting down in a classroom, 8 o'clock to 2:30 or 3 o'clock? Is your child built for that? There's other options. I mean, especially for those of us that live in the US, there's so many options. Yes, they can be more expensive at times, but there's charter schools out there, that are operating on a funding level like a public school, because you don't have to pay for that. So look at your child as the individual, beautiful self that he or she is, and then ask yourself, do I want to tame that beautiful light that is within my child? And we came across our middle child. We worked with her. She is wild in nature, and I absolutely love that. I don't want any system to cut her wings. She is beautiful. She is wild. She loves to be in nature. And so I had to sit down and ask if this public system that they're in right now, is this a fit for her? Or do I want to go more Montessori or more nature school that I explored, kids in nature? And they do have curriculum. They do follow credentials. And that allowed me to really look at the system as a whole. Is it cheap? Yes. Is it going to be cheap in the long run? No. So it may be a fit for our son, for example, who's more, in alignment with, okay, I'm gonna do what I'm told, and I need to break that as well. I'm still breaking that. It's like, hey, you got to break the rules a little bit. You can't be, I want to, you are a leader. You shouldn't be a follower. You are a leader. What would you do? So have a conflict with your teacher. Have an argument, a supportive argument with your principal. Bring the points that you want to bring. I'm treating him like a young adult. I'm not treating them like a child. You better eat your peas or whatnot. I'm not. That's not how I raise them. So I would encourage every parent, and I know it's hard because we're all super busy, but every parent, just look into that light in your child and ask yourself if this is the right place and if this is the right protocol that I want to follow, because a psychiatrist or psychologist decided to label my child with ADD or ADHD or whatnot. So it's exactly what you said. Let's go beyond the label. What is going on?
Yeah. And that's such a good point about it's always, at least on the paradigm that with the school system, it's always, oh, the child's the problem. And
right.
Yeah,
right.
It's like, let's look at the environment. And you made such a good point too, that you're actually dimming their gifts. You're dimming their light by just putting them on medication. And as you were saying that, I was reminded that a lot of like extremely talented artists were known to have like quote unquote mental health issues but so it's true. Interesting because I think that sometimes like the greatest gifts can also be, they come with maybe feeling more sensitive to things, or that they're perceiving a world that maybe not all of us have as much access to, and that makes them seem a little bit crazy. So I think there's a lot of that we can, take a step back and not be so quick to just medicate out something that wants to be labeled as a quote unquote problem, and to dig a little bit deeper. Yeah.
And a lot of times it's us that need to be regulated. It's us, the adults, the parents. If we feel stressed, if our cortisol is off the charts, take that B complex. Have you checked your B levels? Have you checked your iron levels? Have you checked your hormones level lately? If everybody has insurance, or even if not, you can get that checked for you. Look at your thyroid hormones. Look at your panel. see what you're missing. If you're not regulated, if you don't have the tools to control your own stress levels, how can you help your child? You can't.
Yeah.
So Brooke and I, part of the reason why we're doing this episode is because we are going to share with you some free things that you can do with your child and with yourself, because I believe that there is this invisible placenta still going from the mother to the child, and they pick up on every single vibe. Even if we say we're good, they know if we're good or we're not good. Like they know, they can sense it, they can smell it, they can detect it. So we're going to give you those tools that are available for each and every one of us in this episode.
Yes. And thank you for saying that, because these are tools that, one, yes, you can use for yourself, you can use for your child, but it's so true that it comes down, a lot of it comes down to you, and your child is a reflection of your state of being. So and even if we can all deal with a little, find ways to deal with our stress. We all, there's so many opportunities there. So with that, let's get into like some of these tools and talking about them. I guess the first is breath work is so powerful. And, by the time this airs, we'll have also had Noah's husband, David, was on our podcast. And so we have a whole podcast on breath work. But what I find so beautiful about the breath is that it's the one true thing that is with you from the moment you arrive on this earth, and it is with you from until the moment that you leave this earth. And so it's yours, that no one can take from you. And through that is the expression of your ultimate sovereignty, your ultimate being. And so looking at it from that lens, it makes complete sense that when you can fully tap into it, I mean, we're breathing all the time, but to consciously be aware of our breath. And then, so even that is a huge step right there, but also then ways that you can manipulate your breath and use breath tools are going to put you into a state to be able to better handle the emotions that come, because we're all going to have our feelings that come up and down. And but that right there can be such a simple way to handle.
Yeah, breath work, meditations is just a fantastic tool for emotional health and healing overall. What it does, I mean, you don't have to meditate for an hour and a half. You don't need to sit in a remote mountain or go to a retreat. You can actually do it within 10 minutes. What you're doing in that meditation and breath work, you're regulating your pathway, and you're stepping away from the fight or flight, and you're going into the parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah. And so basically you're going from the beta brainwave, which is where we're at now. It's a go, 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 to the theta brainwave, which is more intuitive. So you can do it anytime, anywhere. You can involve nature if you want to have nature therapy. There's a great app called, not that you need an app to breathe, but just to guide you. There's an app called Breathe. It's a free app you can download to your phone. It takes you through 4 or 5 cycles of breath work. And there's a bunch of breathing exercises, other relaxation techniques, and you can just, relax and get your mind cleared. You can use a mantra if you wish, like be here now, or let it come, or let it go, let it flow, whatever it is. Can, write yourself something short where you can put the mantra while you're breathing, 5 seconds in, hold it for a second and a half, and exhale for 8 seconds, because we always want to focus on the parasympathetic. So it's the exhale that we want a little longer than the inhale.
Yeah. And even if you don't have 5 or 10 minutes to focus on your breath, even the power of just taking one mindful, really deep breath to reset. I feel like that right there reminds you of just the power of the breath. So, and it is, I know you're incorporating breath work with the kids that you see in your clinic. And I mean, I feel like there are places that are using that in kind of a more clinical setting, like using the breath as a tool with other things, and that there's really powerful results that can be taking place with people that are in depression, or not saying that necessarily can be used alone, but it's powerful.
It's one more tool. If you wake up in the morning and feeling anxiousness, you can count your blessings. You can start a gratitude journal. We do it with the kids as well. They're at the mental health facility. They keep a gratitude journal. When you focus on 3 things you're grateful for today, you wake up in a different state. When you take the time to relax that jaw, not tighten up your jaw so much, and take that inhale and exhale, that already sets you up for success for the day. But if you just jump off the bed and go, you haven't applied the tools that are free and available to you in order to really make it the best day possible for you and your children.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too, like all of these that we're talking about, it gets like, once you start developing those pathways in your brain, it gets much easier to just find gratitude in the moments. Like I feel like I connect with that on a personal level, that it's like in any habit that you do, it's takes a little bit more effort at first, and then you start to see that just becomes your way of being in a lot of ways. So exactly. Yeah. Another powerful way to release stored emotions and stored energy is through movement of the body. So just movement of itself, whether it be a hardcore exercise or yoga. I mean, they are going to come with their own specific benefits, and that, maybe there's particular exercises that, based on what you need at the time, is better for you. But in general, moving your body is going to be so helpful. One, in that you do have, we've referenced this a few times, but The Body Keeps the Score. That's a wonderful book to really understand the way that, stored energy, stored emotions are kept in our fascia, in our tissues, and you can physically release those. And then also just the hormones that are produced through moving your body. So
right, it can moving, so getting our bodies moving, it doesn't only benefit our physical health, but can have a great impact on our mental health as well, like you said, because movement increases the blood flow to the brain, which allows us to feel better and handle stress better. And regular exercise, especially aerobic exercise, can actually reduce the anxiety by making your brain's fight or flight system, we just talked about, less reactive. And it releases those endorphins. And when it comes to addictions in particular, there is an adrenaline rush that comes with it. Some of my clients have eating disorders. We're going to touch on it in a different episode. But for example, for someone who is purging, there is an adrenaline that comes with it. So how do you replace that adrenaline? How do you release those endorphins in a healthy way? You can't just have someone get off cigarettes and not bring something back in. You have to work on it, either subconsciously, hypnotherapy, or literally replace that addiction with a healthier behavior. You change your behavior, then you crack the code. So releasing those endorphins and releasing a serotonin, for example, the joy hormone, these are great, not just in short term, but physical activity will have the long-lasting impact on the way you think and feel. So consider adding some gentle movements like a walk or some stretching or yoga to your day, because they can really get the blood flowing and support healing overall. And I would say, like, the emphasis would be to benefit our overall health, because some of the addictions that I see with kids and young adults that have eating disorders, they are disconnected from their body. Some of them have reached a point that they don't know what hunger feels like. They don't want to move their body too much because they used to do it too much, and that made them, back off a little bit, start not eating, going towards, restriction and anorexia. So case to case, what I do with them, the movement that I do with them personally, I do the 4-minute nitric oxide. You can Google it, Dr. Zach Bush. I do that with them because I know in 4 minutes, we get to do a really gentle, high interval intensity training. And they got their, they're releasing the nitric oxide that is kind of like stuck in their mind, and they're releasing the oxytocin. So I do that, followed by breath work, followed by a nutrition analysis of some sort, and we work together because this is a partnership. If you're working in the healing industry as a practitioner, it's a partnership. It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, 100%. That's incredible that you do that, because I know, like, any sort, especially the 4-minute workout is just such a, like, in that short amount of time, you're going to feel your body. And like you were saying, it's that disconnection from the body that it's bringing it back to being able to really feel into your body. Because if you're not feeling into the emotions that you're having, then it's going to be harder to deal with them as they come, because they're just there. They're not separate from you. So it's like, the more you can separate yourself from it, which we can talk about later too, because I think that's so important. But and then as a third thing is just that going back to connection and feeling a true sense of community. And we've talked about this a lot on the podcast too, like the blue zones we talked about, that in all of those areas, one of the things that they had in common was that they had a true community. And I think that is where too, you have to make that important distinguishment, because you mentioned too that like a lot of these kids that you're working with are hanging out with community, but it's not, it's kind of the wrong influences. And to me, like if you're in a true community, it's a community that's really allowing you to be who you are, like fully seeing you for you. And on the flip side of that, though, to be able to really have someone be able to see you for you, it's also you having the firm understanding of who you are. So it's that like beautiful kind of exchange, I think, of like being able to understand who you are, and then bringing that into a full sense of community.
100%. Yeah. And I feel like as women, we do have best friends, right? We do have, if we have our mom around, that we can vent to her, but there's been a study done. It wasn't a study. I think it was one of the speakers, I forgot his name. So he was at a speaking engagement, and he asked the room to raise their hand if they have a friend or more than one friend that they can vent to. So most women raised their hand. Mom! So that speaker asked people to raise their hand if they have someone they can vent to, and most women raised their hand. And then he asked the men, can you raise your hand if you have someone you can confide in, someone that you talk to, even bi-monthly? And only one man out of like 170 raised their hand. So we are not exempt by gender. We need to understand that we need to be in a community, make an effort, join a gym, go see people, even better, go fresh air, go to the park, whatever you need to do, just take a break from your normal daily grind, step outside, see other people. This will help, if we're talking about fresh air, this helps increase oxygen levels in the blood, which can help improve mental clarity and memory, as well as just feeling energized, feeling supported, feeling that you're not alone, because you're not alone.
Yeah. Well, and I think that also speaks so well. First I'll address like the about the men, not having someone to speak to. I think that's a huge eye opener, and it does speak, like with our masculine and feminine, episode that we had, we talked about this a little bit, but I do think that that's kind of like a part of that wounded masculine type energy, and where if we can get to a more healthy place with that, it will be beautiful. But I also think just with looking at being alone and the idea of isolation and what we've been through, for the past 2 years, or, 3 years, I guess, almost, and how, we never in a time had we been so physically separated from each other, and
Right.
just the impacts of that, I think will be, and we are seeing those impacts. We're seeing them with our children. We're seeing them, within ourselves. And so it's just, I'm hoping we can learn from that. But I think at the most, taking responsibility for yourself, and like where you can plug into community.
Right.
And I think too, like, as much as, social media can be great and our virtual lives can be great, and in many ways they can foster connection. Like, I mean, for us, we've never met in person. We just know each other virtually, but so it can be wonderful. That being said, I think that oftentimes there's like this false sense of like scrolling through Facebook or through social media, you're almost putting yourself in a more sense of isolation, like that's not necessarily true connection.
Right.
And
And from a
so,
mental health perspective, those young adults that scroll through social media and they see that glamorized life of bullshit that I keep reminding them, I say it is not real. A second
yeah,
after this celebrity took the picture, she went on to either yell at her children or whatnot. It is not real. And that's part of the conversation that I have with them, because they grew up with social media, idolizing someone else's life, someone else's body, and not giving the attention and the respect and the gratitude to their own body, who is capable of doing miracles for them. So that's taking their phone, especially for those that are 12 years old, uh, the young population at the mental health facility. Taking their phones is a very traumatic experience for them when they get admitted there, but it's also very healing in the long run. In those 60 to 90 days that they are there, they will not have distractions other than a phone call to their, family or parents or whatnot. And you see them bringing that awareness back into themselves, as opposed to, like you said, scrolling down, Facebook or Instagram and glamorizing someone else's life, because it's not real. It's not real.
right. Well, I
None
mean,
of
there's
it
so
is.
many filters, and just, yeah, things through an image can be distorted and perceived in ways that just aren't reality. And yeah, I mean, and I feel like even as adults, it's like you have to kind of keep yourself in check with that it's so easy to kind of get. And then when you think putting a child
Right.
on, that's on social media, like they don't necessarily even have, the full development of their brain and the
Yes.
tools to, as many adults as well. So not so I think that, yeah, I feel like that could be a discussion in itself, just like the health of social media for children. It's just, yeah, I'm not there yet, of course, with my kid, but there's going to be, yeah, it's
Yeah.
something I'm going to be bringing a lot of intention with,
Yeah. And
and how
perhaps
she uses that.
instead of scrolling on your phone indoor, get outside for a sunlight, with the sunlight, which is another component for health. If sunlight has the way of making things brighter, literally, and bringing joy into our lives, because having with the sunlight, it can release your serotonin. Serotonin is what the SSRI, the antidepressants, are all about. They're giving it to you chemically. Why don't you take it for free outside? That sun
Yeah.
help us to maintain healthy vitamin D levels in our bodies. And thanks to those vitamin D receptors in our central nervous system, that leads to the improved mood and mental health overall. So it strengthens our immune system. It actually strengthens every single mineral we have in our body, and it stimulates our healing mechanisms that then have impact on our overall being. So if you want to gain benefit from this natural source, just aim to get outside just for a bit, 15, 20 minutes each day. And if it's
Yeah.
not possible, then sitting by a window, if you can crack the window a little bit, breathe in some fresh air and catch some rays, it's another alternative option. So
And I
stop
think it's,
scrolling and going outside.
yes, exactly. And I think it's important to note that with those benefits of vitamin D and the sunlight, it having sunscreen blocks all of that. So
That's
to,
true, right?
yeah, so it doesn't mean necessarily like go out in the heat of the day and just let the sun bake on you
Yeah,
without any sort of SPF. But if you can just in like a morning sunshine, 15, 20 minutes, it's
Exactly.
going to do a lot for your health. Yeah, absolutely.
And connect with Mother Nature. If you're already in the sunlight, you're already breathing fresh air. So ground. Let's talk a little bit about grounding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, grounding, you're literally like taking the energy, the negative ions from the earth, and your body's pulling them up and using that electrical charge. So it's hugely beneficial for your health to do grounding. Just get outside and walk around barefoot, or if you don't want to walk around barefoot, just sit down in the grass.
Yeah.
And breathe. You can do two things at once and get your sunshine.
Yeah.
Which is why nature is so healing when you're out there and in nature. Yeah. Yeah.
You can do it, can do it if you have a body of water, if you have an ocean or a river or a forest, whatever it is, by your own garden, just take in the present moment and try to pay attention to what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you feel. So these are important things again, they're free. They're just step outside of your own, four walls and create that connection, that balance between our minds and our bodies.
Yeah, exactly. Free and no side effects.
Exactly.
Yeah. 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 Another thing that I do want to bring up when we talk about like community and isolation and stuff, because I think it's such a beautiful example, but that cancer is in its true form, isolation from healthy cells, that it's literally one cell starting to forget who it is and the overall sense of community, and that it becomes cancerous. And that's, I just, even from a spiritual perspective, I think that's so beautiful to just think like, it's just forgotten, just as like it's forgotten who it is. Yeah. And so bringing it back into community and away from isolation, whether it's a person or a cell or a group, or it's that unity understanding of things.
Yeah, 100%. There's a whole the Taoist medicine talks about it, and there is another doctor that brought it to the attention. His name was Dr. Emmer, and Dr. Emmer is the founder of, I think it's called the German medicine. So some of what he talked about was exactly that. He talked about how there's a discord that is being created in our body, but he talks about a trauma of some sort, a trauma that happened, something didn't connect with us properly, and then it manifests psychosomatically, so into a dis-ease, right? Just like the cells decided to isolate themselves from the rest of the cells. And I have clients that have cancer, and part of the healing process is not just the food. As a nutritionist, I know food is really important, but it's not just that. Sometimes you can see people that are super healthy, according to what health is for them for that season in their lives, but they're super miserable. It's more than that. So with cancer clients, it's always a matter of connecting to where it hurts and what happened. What happened that they felt they needed to isolate themselves. And a lot of times you see these really accomplished people that are going after what they believe, but the drive behind that is, I can do it by myself. I don't need anyone else. So having that as the motivation, as opposed to, I'm going to share with the world what I really excel in. You see the difference? So it's different motivators, but getting you to the same task. So getting back inside, along with the nutrition and hydration protocol that we work on, who are you? Who are you being in that moment? Are you doing it because of anger? It can be a great motivation. Or are you doing it because you have something you want to share with the world?
Yes. Yeah, I find that really interesting. Just that it's like, it may not even be, there's some part of you that feels disconnected or not fully able to embody like who you are. So, and it goes back to just everything is connected. Your physical health is connected to your mental health, which is connected to your health at the very cellular level, that it's just all so intertwined. And so whether you're talking about mental health or treating something like cancer, again, it also speaks to how just looking at it through so many different angles can only be beneficial. That, just looking at it through strictly like a pharmaceutical lens is not doing us any favors, whether it's with whatever dis-ease that may be. Yeah.
Right.
So that being said, we were saying like with that there's so much more than food. But then I also think on the flip side, when we're talking about mental health, food is rarely even brought up as something to consider. And in fact, it's, a huge piece as well, that, the foods that you're eating are going to make you feel a certain way. So of course, and they're going to have an impact on your brain, on your body. So, it's important to eat foods that support your biology. So,
right. And to that, I would add, because some of those clients have heavy metals, and heavy metals such as copper and mercury in the brain. So they're not allowing for neurotransmitters to do their proper work. And so toxic heavy metals can cause or play a huge role in many different chronic illnesses and symptoms. That includes migraines, depression, ADHD, brain fog, dizziness, aches and pains, tingles, autoimmune disease, eczema, memory loss, anxiety, psoriasis, Parkinson's, and more and more and more. So it's really important to consume. I look at 5 different foods that work synergetically to remove toxic heavy metals daily. And some of the work is based on, it's actually the entire work is medical mediums work. And if anyone wants to find out more, they should, look at the book Brain Saver by Anthony William, who is known as medical medium. So his conclusion is that there's 5 foods that help us properly remove and responsibly remove heavy metals daily. Those are fresh cilantro, wild blueberries. You find them at the frozen section. Wild blueberries, not regular blueberries. They're very potent in antioxidant. Atlantic dulse, barley grass juice powder, and high quality spirulina. So the key is to consume all 5 foods in a 24-hour window and do that consistently every day. It can take time to remove toxic heavy metals from our brain or the rest of the body. It can take up to a year and a half. But I've done that when in previous seasons of my life when I felt the need to. So you can make it into a shake with coconut water to help dehydration as natural electrolytes. You can make it into your, wild blueberry kind of acai bowl without the acai, whatever you want. But these 5 foods are particularly important to remove the heavy metals that we just talked about.
Well, I think that, like, with that said too, when you're talking about a very serious illness, mental illness, and that's not being looked at, I mean, because if you have, I feel like we all have some level of heavy metals that, and our body can detox them in some ways, but like we're just exposed to them on such a whole, different level now, just with the amount of contamination and so many different things. But yeah, I think though that like from a mental, like, clinician diagnosis, that should be looked at even closer, because there's such an impact on, as you were saying, like, brain neurotransmit, the way that it's impacting the way the brain can do the job. So,
Right.
So yeah, I mean, from a I think that's great as a maintenance to do those 5 foods. And I think that's so important. But yeah, like knowing that, like, if somebody is showing extreme mental illness like that, that should certainly be looked at.
Right.
And
we all talk about gut inflammation. We don't talk about brain inflammation. Like there's some research being done that showed that gluten, processed sugar, natural flavor are all MSG, monosodium glutamate. And for kids or adults that are already susceptible to neurological issues, that can be the determined factor of whether they're going to heal, whether they're going to take time to heal, or whether it's not going to hurt them at all. There's a TED talk with a woman. She's a mother, she's a scientist who experimented on her autistic child, experimented with, I should say, her autistic child, and she just removed all the foods that were MSG based, including natural flavors. So just a little heads up, you guys, there's nothing natural about natural flavors. Stay away from it. It just, increases inflammation in the brain. Anything that says citric acid is really black mold. It's no longer the lemon. So try to find things without citric acid. Organic companies are to blame as well. Like there's a bunch of companies out there that still add citric acid and natural flavors. So try to stay away from that if you can. So that mom, who is a scientist, she started removing all those little ingredients from her prepackaged food for her child. And she documents it in her TED talk via videos. And I don't know how long it took her, but her autistic child that didn't speak or threw really crazy tantrums for years and years and years was able to heal herself by avoiding these processed foods. And that's how essential this is to our healing for a child or a young adult that is already susceptible for neurological issues. Right? So be aware. I mean, I don't know if if you walk down the aisles of a supermarket, 90% of the food is poison. It shouldn't even be on our shelves. I don't understand what these crazy cereals are about, what these crazy candies are about. Like, so that's why I shop at a really small supermarket. I don't want to get mad every time I go that I need to regulate my cortisol level when I go to
getting triggered.
Getting super triggered because it makes you sick.
Yeah. It's funny. Like, I mean, and I don't like when I walk into a grocery store, because I don't shop a lot. I'll go to Whole Foods and kind of stay on those outer way. But if I go to kind of a quote unquote normal conventional grocery store, I have to say, like, I'm always a little bit shocked. Like, I'm like, whoa, this is what people are eating. What?
Yeah.
Well, I don't mean that. I'm hoping that doesn't come across as like elitist and it's just the more but it just, to me, it just points out that there is a huge culture shift that needs to happen. And, and it's not just that too. I understand that, these foods are cheaper but like at what cost? And so it's that's a whole conversation there.
And for those that tell me, because I do have clients that said your food are expensive, I said, I don't expect you to buy organic. It has nothing to do with you healing. I expect you to buy less processed food. When you go to a $99 store or whatever, dollar store, 99-cent store, you can buy frozen veggies. You can buy lentils and legumes. You can buy rice. There's no excuse.
Yeah, so true. So true. And there's the education piece there, because I thought so many people don't even know what to do with a lentil or a bean but yes, like that's much cheaper than, So it is a myth that eating healthy has to be expensive, because it certainly doesn't. Yeah. And also recognizing that all of these other things factor in that we just said are free much into your well-being. Right. So
I'm not expecting you to buy $1,000 worth of a neurofeedback session. I mean, just ground yourself, go outside, use Mother Nature, do your breath work, eat less processed food, because you have to understand what we do in our body day in and day out does matter. Yeah. It does matter. It affects your overall being. It affects your mood. It affects how you regulate yourself before you try and regulate your own child. It affects everything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and what you were saying with the TED Talk with the mother, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Yeah. But it's also important to note that it's not just anecdotal, that there's actually a lot of research coming out, and we can link to some of that as well, on the impact of the microbiome and brain health and and mental health, but particularly the way that the brain and the gut interact with each other. Right. And there's such an emergent information there. And speaking of which, I was actually shocked to see this, but on the Wall Street Journal, I saw a notification on my phone that they actually said that the microbiome is being linked to mental health. And I was like, wow, I feel like when it makes it to mainstream news, that it's like, okay, like that's good. But it's so true. So, and just knowing too that like these processed are destroying your gut microbiome, and things that are going to rebuild your microbiome are well, one, like eating as clean as possible, as in, organic when you can, but like leafy greens, but then in particular, like anytime you can add, like fermented foods, like sauerkraut and, prebiotic type foods like that, there's so much that you can do to rebuild your microbiome.
Right. And like we said, gut is referred to as our second brain, and 95% of our serotonin, which we talked about, natural SSRI, and 50% of our dopamine actually is made in the gut. So the gut bacteria is the one that sends the peptides that send the hunger, satiation, and inflammation signals. And science actually says that the brain is not really in control of the mood and cravings. After all, it's in the gut. It starts with certain foods and supplements, and etc. But so if the gut is in charge, that's really good news, because we can change it through food and action. And we need to realize that the majority of our brain, the gut-brain barrier, and what our brain is made of, it's made out of glucose, glycogen. So that glycogen it's not in the form of sugar or candy. It's in the form of fruit. Give your brain those fruits that it needs. Give your brain those mineral salts that it needs, like things that a great pair for those. Some of us have our adrenals shut, and people with mental illness do have their adrenals shut because everything they've been through. So that frequent eating is another way of supporting the nervous system that provides a lot of adrenal support by eating light, balanced meals every 1.5 to 2 hours. Some of my clients, I have them do that protocol because it allows them to stabilize their blood sugar throughout the day so that the adrenals don't have to interfere.
Okay, ready.
So some of those fruit are really important.
And yeah, what you said too, of like, it's not like so much of that, it's your bacteria that's actually doing the talking. So as much as you might try to cut the sugar and stuff, if the bacteria in your gut, that's what they're addicted to, then it's going to make the sugar cravings even harder to get under control. So if you can just think of it from addressing the gut first, then
exactly.
It all goes from there. Yeah. And then, I mean, there are, I know you touched on it, but just there's like specific foods that are really good for brain health. Like
so those that we talked about. Yeah. And the hydration, we should mention the hydration, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think, I mean, and we have a whole episode on hydration, right. But it's when we can adequately hydrate ourselves, then we're able to have the proper nutrients delivered to our cells, and then our organs are able to function properly. And of course, our brain is one of those organs. So,
right.
And then, go ahead.
And if one suffers from any neurological problems or under intense stress, then hydration is critical and can really help us heal. So we need to drink plenty of what we talked about in our episode of hydration, living water. So these are water that activated by the earth. And you can create your own by adding lemon juice or honey to the water. Coconut water, freshly squeezed juice are all great ways to ensure that you're hydrated.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit more than just drinking water.
Yes. Yeah.
As far as other tools, are there any others?
So processing emotions is a big thing for those with mental illness. And I mean, they're never the sole reason of physical suffering, right? Sometimes, emotions can serve as a trigger for underlying susceptibility. We know that in addition to the current state of the world, you mentioned the pandemic, that might also include a trauma of intensely stressful life events like a breakup, divorce, death of loved ones, life changes, and many more. So being able to work through the emotions connected to these events can really help maintain mental stability and balance. And it's important to recognize that you did not create your illness. You did not manifest your illness. Even if we talked about Dr. Emmer before with the Discord, you did not bring your illness onto yourself. And the answers are there. You can heal. And like we talked about before, the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, is an amazing tool if you're suffering from, mental illnesses. And these steps may not be enough to do on their own, what we mentioned, but there are many ways to get professional help. And we know that the CBT is the FDA's first line of treatment, and yet physicians and scientists prescribe harsh pharmaceuticals over other more gentle therapeutic modalities, some of which we just mentioned. And but there is new apps coming out. I just heard about the app. So there's a new apps by Paratherapeutics, they're called, and they created digital therapeutics and paired downloadable apps that are called Reset and Reset O. So these are also available on Prescribed, that these provide CBT help and can be covered by insurance. And those help with substance abuse, depression, physical conditions, and now they're adding insomnia. On top of that, I would mention a few supplements that can help, like nutrients reducing depression. Those would be omega-3 fatty acids. If you eat, animal food, you can attend to salmon, flax seeds, chia seeds, watermelon seeds, just chew them. Tomato seeds, walnuts, these all have omega-3. Vitamin D, we just mentioned sunlight or supplements, about 1,000 IUD. Folate, B9, you can have it through leafy greens, citrus fruits, beans, lentils. Iron, if you need iron supplement, go for that. If not, attend to those leafy greens. Magnesium, again, spinach, kale, nuts, seeds, almonds, pumpkin seeds. Zinc, I prefer zinc sulfide. I think it's really, really clean. And legumes have zinc. B12, you want to make sure that when you buy B12, because currently we can't have a B12 from the food, you want to make sure it has two coenzymes, the methylcobalamin and adenosylcobalamin. Selenium, Brazil nuts, and fish. And when you feel that you're in a funk, you can ask your PCP, if you work with PCP or ND, about magnesium glycinate, lemon balm as a tea or tincture, L-lysine, ashwagandha is great, GABA is great. And GABA, by the way, if you take your bestie on a hike in the sun, no sunglasses, you'll get those GABA naturally. 5-MTHF. We talked about B complex. If you don't do omega-3, you can do EPA, DHA. Vitamin C is amazing. Melatonin, curcumin, saffron, something that's called SAMI. And as far as books, like we mentioned before, we have, The Body Keeps the Score and Medical Medium Brain Saver are fantastic books to look at for additional resources.
Yeah, that's such a comprehensive list. That's wonderful. Yeah. And if that seemed overwhelming at all, like really, if you just think of it as eating a varied, whole foods based, plant-based diet, that most of those nutrients you can naturally get. That being said, our soils are a lot more depleted, so it's always good to have some supplementation in there where it's needed. But yeah, it's such a comprehensive list.
Yeah.
It's
a comprehensive case, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you tackle it?
And and that brings up such a good point that we as a society look at healthcare and, well, one, we separate out mental health from physical health just automatically. But we take such a reductionist viewpoint to so many of these things, and we are complex beings. We have a lot going on, from what's happening on a biochemical level, what's happening on an energetic level, what's happening through our unprocessed trauma, that there's so many different aspects that need to be looked at. And when you're talking about overall wellness, it's incorporating all of those things. But then also when you're looking at someone who does have a label of a mental health problem, like, where can we look beyond giving them a drug? And there's so many options available. And it's not to say that one of those things is going to work. It's got to be comprehensive and holistic. That's the whole kind of point of being able to treat the whole person, is to look at all the different areas and understand how they're connected and can support a person in their healing. And that's also not to say that pharmaceuticals don't have their place, perhaps in certain circumstances, but to think that you're just giving a pill and then there's no really even plan to get off of that pill, there's so much more that we can be doing. So, yeah. And I think a lot of just our mental health crisis, zooming it back out, we are so disconnected in our society. And I think that with so much that we talk about on this podcast of like being able to connect in with that I am statement, that who you are, that at your core, you're a soul, and that it is such a powerful, simple realization that, you know, we can come back to, that when we just are able to see that we get over identified with our minds, and our minds can run away with certain thoughts.
Right.
And so that can often be just the spiral towards a downfall, like a into a deep depression, and, you know, not saying that that's all, it's just changing our thoughts. However, it can be that powerful, that when we can bring that awareness in, that we're not whatever thoughts we're having, that we're something much, it like makes me emotional, because we're so much bigger than that. We are spiritual beings that are here to shine our light. And so we have so much that tells us not to, and to dim it, and to, you know, not be who we are.
Right.
But
don't dim your light for anyone, I would say.
Exactly. So yeah. Anything else you have to add for?
No, that's a beautiful summary. Yeah, it's the over identification of the self with the mind, and, you know, thinking that we have outsourced our power to the medical system. Like, they can have a benefit. Like, I delivered my kids with the epidural. So yes, there is great. But before I discovered my own healing journey, I was on thyroid medication until the doctor and the endocrinologist said, you'll be on thyroid medication for the rest of your life. And that was, to me, was watch me. And then I started my own healing journey, because like no one is gonna determine my fate. I was like, this is the Leo inside of me. It's not gonna happen. So that's what we're talking about here. When you get educated about all the tools that you have available to you, you may want to reconsider how you approach this on a whole humanistic way, not just the band-aid that will shut them off or make them relax, because we are more than that. Like you said, we're creatures of light, and we're here to share our light. And let's not have our kids dim their light for anyone.
Yep. Amen. And yeah, and going back, when we are able to shine our light fully, then that it makes our kids feel more safe and able to share and shine their light.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. So thank you guys for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.